Morpheus used his 3 divine tools to begin rebuilding the kingdom of dreams, but suddenly, a vision of the god of destiny appeared before him. He summoned all his siblings in the endless family. It seemed something serious was about to happen. Soon, the gods of desire and despair entered the great hall together. At that moment, the painting of the youngest member of the endless family suddenly melted its colors, and a mentally chaotic girl appeared before everyone. She was the embodiment of madness and unpredictability. Even though not all were present, the god of destiny decided to reveal the reason for summoning the members. Not long ago, he had met the 3 sisters of fate. When the god of destiny opened the book of destiny, he discovered that it had foretold he must summon all the gods today, and in the future, an unprecedented catastrophe would occur. However, even the god of destiny could not know what exactly would happen. These words made Morpheus extremely uncomfortable, because such a vague prophecy had delayed his reconstruction of the dreaming. Taking advantage of the moment, the goddess of desire, who had long disliked her older brother, immediately mocked and provoked him. When she spoke of Morpheus's love story in front of the family, her words instantly revived a painful memory within him. Time turned back 10,000 years. Nada was the queen and ancestor of humanity. In dreams, she never dreamed for herself, but always of building a utopia without poverty and war. In reality, she continuously worked to make that dream a reality. That noble quality deeply attracted Morpheus. Morpheus kept appearing in Nada's dreams. Finally, one day, unable to suppress his feelings any longer, he revealed his true identity to her and expressed his desire to be with the woman he loved. Although Nada understood that the union between a mortal and a god would bring great disaster, her reason was clouded by love, and she accepted his affection. But not long after, a meteor fell from the sky. Seeing her city and people reduced to ashes, Nada was overwhelmed with sorrow. She understood that this was heaven punishing her. Therefore, she decided to self-exile and leave Morpheus. But that action completely enraged him. She would rather be banished to hell than accept his sincere love. In the end, Nada gave up her chance to become a goddess and chose to enter hell to atone for her sins. The death his sister knew all of this was the consequence of her younger brother's selfishness. To make amends, Morpheus decided once more to descend into hell to rescue Nada from the suffering there. However, Morpheus knew he needed to prepare, so he first sent his subordinate, Cain, to hell. Morpheus sent a visitation card to Lucifer and informed her that he would soon arrive. But clearly, Lucifer still could not swallow the humiliation of being defeated by Morpheus. She summoned all the demons in hell and prepared to welcome him once more. Soon after, a fire formation appeared beside Cain. Just a second later, he was teleported back to the dreaming. He immediately warned his master of what he had seen in hell. It was a trap waiting for Morpheus to step into, but Morpheus had already made up his mind. He wore his mask, held sand in hand, and transformed into a whirlwind. His silhouette approached hell. Unlike last time, this time he possessed the divine tools, and his power was immense. However, when he reached Hell's gate, he discovered the door was wide open. Not even a single demon guarded it. While Morpheus was still bewildered, the voice of Lucifer suddenly rang out from behind. No one knew what she was planning. Morpheus still chose to remove his mask. Then Lucifer said she had sent all souls and demons away from hell, including Nada. She had ruled hell for billions of years and had long lost interest in the job. Lucifer had never let demons wreak havoc on the human world. Yet humans hated hell as if all evil came from demons. A burdensome and thankless job made Lucifer utterly disheartened. She opened the final door and took out an ancient weapon. Lucifer hoped Morpheus could help her sever her angel wings. One might have expected a great battle between the two, but instead, it turned into an awkward situation. Morpheus walked behind her and swung his hand to sever the angel wings. But right at that moment, Lucifer completely changed her attitude. She said, "Didn't I swear not to harm you in hell?" While Morpheus was still confused, Lucifer handed over the key to the gates of hell. From now on, Morpheus would be the ruler of this place. This was Lucifer's revenge. Hell is a reflection of heaven and also the hardest realm to govern in all existence. After speaking, she turned and left without looking back once. Knowing he had caused a catastrophe, Morpheus immediately sought out his sister for advice. Death said the beings from hell were now flooding into other worlds. If they weren't stopped in time, other gods and even the creator would come to trouble Morpheus. Now he had only 2 choices: either rule hell himself or hand the key over to a trustworthy ruler. After saying this, Death turned and left. Just as Morpheus was unsure what to do, a loud noise rang in his ears. Reluctantly, he opened the gate and invited the gods inside. Soon, the palace turned into a marketplace. They didn't come to question or confront him. They came because they heard the throne of hell was vacant. Everyone scrambled to claim it. Butler Lucian was in charge of receiving them one by one. Among them were some hot-tempered individuals who even tried to seize the title of Lord of Hell by force. But they clearly overestimated their strength. Morpheus only needed to raise his voice slightly, and the demons instantly backed down. As night fell, a grand banquet was held in the palace. Morpheus stood above, silently observing everyone's behavior. Among the gods, Thor was clearly the most restless. He wouldn't let things go, and soon a battle broke out. At that moment, Morpheus finally appeared and stopped the senseless fight. Just then, a divine light unexpectedly flashed behind them. It turned out the creator was also concerned about who the key to hell would be handed to, so he had sent 2 angels to monitor Morpheus. During the banquet, gods from all realms showed off their power. Some offered bribes, some issued threats. A Taoist from Japan was the most sincere. He already governed the Japanese underworld, making him professionally suitable. But at that moment, Odin blocked Morpheus's path. He claimed he held intelligence Morpheus could not ignore. It turned out Odin also wanted the position of Lord of Hell, because he feared that after Ragnarok, the people of Asgard would have no place to live. Hell might then be a suitable refuge. After the banquet ended, Morpheus stepped out under the spotlight but still could not make a decision. The next morning, Azazel, a former commander under Lucifer, requested a private meeting with Morpheus. Azazel had prepared a gift to offer him. Azazel wanted to use Nada's soul to blackmail Morpheus, but divine pride and dignity cannot be defiled. Morpheus calmly replied that he would announce the result later. For now, Azazel should leave before it's too late. The next morning, Morpheus summoned all the gods to the Great Hall. In his heart, he had already chosen someone. Despite Azazel's threatening gaze, Morpheus completely ignored him. Then Morpheus walked through the crowd. To everyone's surprise, Morpheus went straight to the 2 angels. It turned out hell was originally created by heaven. Lucifer, the Lord of Hell, was once an angel. As the world's most powerful force, naturally no one dared provoke the Almighty. But Azazel, stubborn as ever, would not give up. He furiously declared he would refine Nada's soul. Immediately after, Azazel revealed his true form. Seeing Nada writhing in pain inside Azazel's belly, Morpheus didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and grabbed her hand, pulling with all his strength. But this was exactly Azazel's scheme. Azazel immediately swallowed Morpheus, hoping to steal his divine power. In Morpheus's realm, all rules are his. Clearly, Azazel failed to realize the true gap between himself and a god. After Morpheus unleashed his overwhelming power, the opportunists no longer dared act. When the banquet ended, the gods took turns bidding farewell to Morpheus. Thor was seen carrying Loki tied up. It turned out Loki refused to return to Asgard, so Odin had no choice but to use this harsh method. After a few words, Morpheus saw them off. The scene shifted to another location where Susanoo was sneaking around the palace, as if searching for something. But just then, Morpheus appeared behind him. It turned out the man in front of him was Loki. He didn't want to return to the prison like Asgard, so he pulled a trick. Loki said, as long as Morpheus didn't send him back, he was willing to do anything. Morpheus replied that he could create an exact replica of Loki to fool Odin. But the price Loki had to pay was that in the future, he must help Morpheus with one task. After clearing up the mess, Morpheus hurried off to find Nada. But after 10,000 years of torment in hell, she no longer had any feelings for him. Morpheus knew he was at fault, so he forced himself to suppress his anger. He understood that if he clung to the past, life for Nada would be no different from hell. In the end, Morpheus could only stand silently, watching the woman he loved walk away and step into the mortal world to begin her next cycle of reincarnation. The entire dream kingdom at that moment also began to rain heavily, echoing his heavy mood. Just then, the crow suddenly arrived to report that the dragon leader had captured an intruder. Morpheus immediately went to the gate and discovered that person captured was his sister, the goddess of hope. It turned out that since the god of destruction in the Endless family suddenly disappeared, the closest person to him, the goddess of hope, had grown so emotionally devastated that she fell ill. At the same time, the domain governed by the god of destruction had no successor. This could cause a calamity for the human world in the future. Immediately afterwards, the goddess of hope took out a piece of paper. On it were written the names of 3 close friends of the god of destruction. Perhaps from them, they could find clues to the missing older brother. The scene shifted to a deserted island. The man before them was the god of destruction, who had been missing for 1,000 years. At this moment, he had immersed himself in his latest art form. For a long time, he had ceased to concern himself with worldly affairs. In another place, Morpheus and his sister came to the mortal realm. The first thing they had to do was find the one called the Immortal. This man named Bernard had lived for over 10,000 years. Although he had a mortal body, he carried a strange power that caused death to overlook him. Yet at that moment, faced with death, Bernard understood that he could not resist fate, so he had to leave the world, guided by him. Shortly thereafter, Morpheus knocked on Bernard's house, but the person who opened the door was his son. When Morpheus learned that Bernard had just died, not even half an hour ago, he immediately wanted to withdraw. They had only begun hoping to find the god of destruction, and now someone close to him had suddenly died. This absolutely couldn't be a coincidence. As if an invisible hand was quietly preventing them from finding the god of destruction. But the goddess of hope didn't care. With a still immature mind, she firmly believed everything was just a coincidence. At her pleading, Morpheus had no choice but to continue to the next target. That was the goddess of erotic dance, Ishtar. Because her devotees were almost gone, this small bar had become her private domain. However, she did not welcome Morpheus's arrival at all. It turned out that 2,000 years ago she had fallen passionately in love with the god of destruction. But Morpheus believed she didn't deserve his brother, so he secretly arranged for their separation. Ishtar left the backstage to prepare for the stage, but she didn't notice that the curtain without wind began to move and was soaked with gasoline, bursting into intense flames. On the other side, Ishtar was using the last of her divine power to perform on stage, while the audience below watched entranced, unaware that the fire was about to engulf place. Fortunately, Morpheus was naturally immune to illusions, so he arrived in time to rescue the goddess of hope from disaster. And this proved that none of these events were coincidences. At this point, they could no longer continue in search of the god of destruction, but the emotions of the goddess of hope immediately collapsed. She looked into her brother's cold face, angrily saying she hated this indifferent family to her bones. After speaking, she turned and returned to her world. That head was none other than Morpheus's son. Because of his own recklessness, the boy had paid an extremely high price. Time turned back 300 years, and today was the wedding day of Orpheus. Morpheus and other members of the Endless family all attended to bless them. Only the goddess of fate wore a worried look filled with love. Under the witness of the goddess of marriage, the two young people officially became husband and wife. At the evening banquet, Morpheus, who was not good at dancing, sat sadly alone in a corner of the room. Only Death stepped beside his younger brother. Morpheus was somewhat puzzled. His other siblings had left the wedding early due to business, yet Death, the busiest, still hadn't returned. A bad premonition suddenly rose in Morpheus's heart. At the same time, Orpheus and his new wife, Eurydice, ran into a small nearby forest. They had no idea that a venomous snake was silently lurking around them. Orpheus screamed for help, but Death peered behind him. Fate seemed to have been sealed. At the funeral the next day, Orpheus sat silently by the sea. He could not accept the truth that his wife had departed that way. In the face of his father's consolation, Orpheus stubbornly insisted that his wife wasn't dead. She had simply descended to the underworld to live. Immediately after, Orpheus earnestly asked his father to beg Hades on his behalf. Even if Orpheus had to use his own soul in exchange, he would accept it. But Morpheus immediately refused. However, Orpheus suddenly became agitated, saying that if Morpheus didn't help him, they would no longer be father and son. After speaking, Orpheus stepped onto a cliff. He thought that perhaps if he jumped from here, he could reunite with his wife. But at that moment, the voice of the god of destruction sounded in his ear. He mocked Orpheus's naive actions, yet immediately after, he still showed Orpheus a way to live. Within the Endless family, the one most connected to the underworld was Death. Then, the god of destruction stretched out his arms wide. The cliff before them began to crack and collapse in chunks. Orpheus crossed through a sea of fire, but on the other side was a cozy mansion. Death was unsurprised by Orpheus's sudden visit. Although she presided over Death, she could not directly take a soul out of the underworld. Under Orpheus's persistent pleading, Death had no choice but to take out a key and open the basement door. There lay the passage leading to the underworld. But before Orpheus departed, Death bestowed him a gift: eternal life. Only in this way could Orpheus freely come and go from the underworld. Orpheus didn't hesitate at all and immediately stepped inside. Soon, he set foot in Hades's domain, but there were countless souls waiting to reincarnate. Orpheus wanted to find his wife in that sea of people, which was like searching for a needle in the ocean. Meanwhile, Hades and his queen also sensed the presence of a living person. But after learning Orpheus's identity and purpose, Hades still decided to help him once. Since there was no exit in the underworld, Orpheus had to leave via a different path, and Hades would let Orpheus's wife's soul follow him behind like a shadow. Very quickly, pathway appeared before Orpheus. He followed that path. After walking an unknown distance, at last a beam of light appeared before Morpheus. But at that moment, behind him came the voice of his wife calling out. Orpheus no longer wanted to live. Orpheus stepped into the domain of man-eaters. Orpheus wanted to end his life that way. The next moment, a group of women, looking no different from killers, leaped at him, pinning him down and baring their teeth to tear him apart. The next morning, Morpheus discovered Orpheus's head by the sea. The immortality granted by Death had now become a curse. Orpheus begged Morpheus to give him a death, yet Morpheus only coldly replied that the Endless family was forbidden from killing one another. Asking Death for help was not a wise move. Therefore, now Orpheus must accept responsibility for his decision. After speaking, Morpheus turned and walked away without looking back. Then Morpheus went to his sister's domain. After a sincere apology, the goddess of hope finally chose to forgive him. The two decided to continue their journey to find the god of destruction, but this time, they could not let any innocent person be drawn in. Within the Endless family, the only one who might know the whereabouts of the god of destruction was Fate, but Fate had long anticipated their intentions. To avoid fracturing the family, he told Morpheus that everyone in their family had special powers, but if he wanted to find the god of destruction, he had to find someone with oracle abilities. Hearing that, Morpheus suddenly realized that his son was also an oracle, and such an ability would surely become the target of various forces. So Morpheus went to Constantine and secretly brought Orpheus's head to a small island in Greece, entrusting it to the monks in the temple for care. 300 years passed in a flash. During that time, Morpheus never visited Orpheus and had almost forgotten the existence of his son. But because he wanted to find the god of destruction, for the first time he set foot on that island. Everything changes, and the guardians there were now descendants of previous monks. When entering the temple, Morpheus found that Orpheus had long anticipated his father would come. Centuries had helped Orpheus gradually understand his father's past anguish. Seeing his son in such a tragic state, Morpheus also acknowledged that perhaps he had been too cruel. After clarifying the purpose of his journey, Morpheus revealed that the god of destruction was now secluded on the small opposite island, because he believed Morpheus would never set foot there because of Orpheus's situation. Immediately after, a small talking dog suddenly appeared before them. At the dining table, Morpheus angrily questioned the god of destruction why he refused to return to manage his domain, and additionally caused 2 innocents to die. The god of destruction, hot-tempered by nature, this time calmly said he had seen the beauty of humanity, and he no longer wanted to experience the coldness of gods. Since Morpheus had come to find him, he ought to depart and go to an unknown place. After that, he handed the little dog to the goddess of hope to care for. The next morning, Morpheus went to the temple. It turned out he had promised his son that when everything ended, he would take his son's life. But when that day really arrived, Morpheus felt an unprecedented pain in his heart. In the end, Morpheus still embraced Orpheus's head. Morpheus staggered back to the palace. Then he delegated the care of his son's funeral to his steward. However, as Morpheus wept lamentably, the 3 sisters of fate sensed an unusual signal. It turned out that within the Endless family, there was a rule forbidding them to kill each other. Yet Morpheus had personally killed his son. So what punishment would he face? This completes the content of Season 2 of The Sandman. Thank you all for following. Goodbye, and see you again in future videos.